NASCAR and ARCA have officially combined forces in 2020, and Hendrick Motorsports has inked an impressive extension with one of their main sponsors. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Got the Chase Elliott hat on, so Twitter, don't get riled up, don't get angry at me. I'm keeping my word. Got the Astros jersey on because it's the playoffs, and I'm not a bandwagon Astros fan. I've actually been an Astros fan longer than I've been a NASCAR fan, so hyped for the baseball playoffs, for MLB playoffs, but I'll try to keep my Astros craziness to a minimum. We've got a lot of NASCAR stuff to talk about today. A few news stories, one that I have to catch up on from a couple days ago earlier this week, and then other breaking news stories from today, actually, which if you're watching this kind of later on Friday, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Let's go and start with the news from earlier this week. We knew from like a month ago, we knew NASCAR had acquired ARCA. Can't talk today. NASCAR had acquired ARCA. ARCA was kind of, for a while, they're considered like the fourth series. You know, it wasn't technically a NASCAR series, but some NASCAR guys raced in it. It was stock cars, and they raced on some of the same big tracks that NASCAR raced on. So ARCA was still very closely related to NASCAR for sure. NASCAR officially purchasing ARCA was kind of just a familiarity in a way. But now regarding 2020, we now have details as to how this NASCAR and ARCA merger is actually going to look, and it's quite impressive, actually. First and most notably, ARCA is primarily combining with the NASCAR K&N Pro Series East and West Series. They will now be called the ARCA Menards Series East and the ARCA Menards Series West. Each will feature approximately 6 to 8 races next year within their relative regions of the country. They'll both have their own full-time competitors, and both will crown their own regional series champions. But it's not going to be called the K&N Series anymore. It's going to be all ARCA. ARCA Menards Series East and West. And now the ARCA Menards Series, which we've had this year and for previous years, that series is for the most part remaining fairly untouched. Still going to be called the ARCA Menards Series. Still going to be 20 races next year. They race at some big tracks such as Daytona early in the year, a big event for them. Charlotte Motor Speedway, they race at a lot of the bigger tracks, but they also race at some kind of smaller regional short tracks as well. But yeah, it's more or less going to be fairly similar in structure, at least to how it is now. 20 race season, ARCA Menards Series, that's what it's called. It is the main thing. It's kind of like technically the fourth NASCAR series now, behind Cup Series, Xfinity, and Trucks, obviously. Then it's ARCA Menards, and I'd say below that, then it's ARCA Menards East and ARCA Menards West. Basically the way it is now, that's how I would consider it too. Cup Series, Xfinity, Trucks, ARCA, and then K&N is kind of how I would view it now. It's basically going to be the same thing, it's just now all called ARCA down there. But now possibly the most notable change, and the one that I am most intrigued by, I must say, is this thing called the ARCA Menards Series Showdown. So of those 20 races that the ARCA Menards Series is going to be running next year, 10 of them are going to feature competitors from not just the ARCA Menards Series, but also East and West Series competitors, from those regional series. They will also participate in a select 10 races of the main ARCA Menards Series season, and the highest points finisher of those 10 races specifically will be crowned its own series showdown champion. There's literally like a season within a season, so there's going to be a champion within the overarching ARCA Menards Series championship run. So that's what I think is going to be most interesting, because you look at this year, some of the most interesting races and characters in stock car racing have come from the regional K&N Pro Series. Like we talk about Derek Kraus, we talk about Haley Deegan a lot. This will now give drivers like them the opportunity to compete in the larger scale ARCA Menards Series, not just as standalone one-off events. No, they'll actually get to compete for points. So people like Derek Kraus or Haley Deegan, if this was in place this year, could have been running for kind of like a championship in the ARCA series. Great way for a lot of these teenagers who are used to just running the short tracks on the regional schedules. Good chance for them to get their feet wet on some of the bigger ovals, the mile and a halfs, the Daytonas even perhaps if they're old enough, because I think there's still an age limit, right? Don't they have to be 18 to run the big super speedways? Either way, it's going to be great to see a lot of these young drivers that are used to the regional events get certain opportunities to not just run races on the larger tracks, but also run for points. Points race with ARCA Series drivers. It's going to be great. I'm excited to see how that works out. Races for the ARCA Menards Series are once again going to be shown on Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports 2, and NAV TV. ARCA East and West races are still going to be shown often on tape delay on NBC Sports Network, the same way K&N Series is now. K&N Series, often their races are available to watch for free on Fans Choice TV. I don't know yet if that's still going to be in place next year. I hope it is, because that's really fun. I love that a lot. Overall, I think this is good news for both the formerly known as K&N Series and also ARCA. The ARCA Menards Series in recent years has struggled, I'd say, with bringing enough competitive cars to each race. There'll be 20 cars in the field, but realistically only like 5 are really competitive and have a shot at even winning the race. So adding in with that Showdown series, letting teams from the now K&N series, soon to be East and West series, letting them show up to some ARCA races and bring their equipment as well. They're all going to be running the same exact type of car now, so it's just going to be a uniform thing there. I think that's really good. It's going to add more competitive cars to some of those races, and I think will overall help the ARCA Menards series product. Now, the biggest negative I think from this is if you look at those schedules for the East and West series, they've seen a couple races cut out of their schedule. They're only going to run 6 to 8 races next year. That is less than what they've been running this year and in years past as the K&N Pro Series. So I can understand why that would be a negative to some of those drivers who maybe like some of those other smaller tracks they go to, and especially for people fans of those tracks that have been cut from the schedule, because we don't know the exact schedule yet, but we know now that some tracks will be cut or will exist in a different capacity. I can understand how that would be disappointing, but a lot of those K&N drivers now are going to get to run in some ARCA races, so I don't think that K&N drivers are going to see their number of races they participate in shortened. I think they'll still get to participate in a ton of races because of the fact that they're able to run ARCA races now. It's just going to be different. It'll be different, so I think there's pros and cons, but overall I think this is a good move. A lot of people were worried when NASCAR purchased ARCA that they'd find a way to ruin what made ARCA, but ARCA was already kind of in a rough place. So I think this is good news. I think this is really good news for them. So I'm excited to see what happens. I look forward to watching some of the races next year. Now, to end today's show, I got to talk about some Hendrick Motorsports stuff. Firstly, before we talk about the big news from today, Alex Bowman had some final thoughts earlier today at Dover practice regarding the incident with Bubba Wallace last week, which has gotten plenty of media attention. When asked about the incident with Bubba Wallace, where Bubba, threw the drink on him on pit road, Bowman said, "I understand it. People are mad inside and outside the race car. I get it. I don't think it was as big a deal as everyone made it out to be." And I kind of agree with Alex Bowman there. I don't think it was a huge deal. That being said, it was obviously extremely entertaining, so I think Alex Bowman should know that people are going to talk about it and are going to still talk about it for months to come. It's still going to be referred back to. It'll probably be in the promo footage for the Roval next year, and Alex Bowman should expect that. And honestly, I think should embrace that. I think everyone involved should embrace that, because that's some good controversy, some good rivalry, some good drama there that NASCAR needs to stay relevant. So I kind of agree with what Alex Bowman said. The actual incident itself, him splashing the water on him, yeah, there was medical attention there. Yeah, it was not a good look for Bubba Wallace to be splashing somebody when they're physically down on the ground and in pain. Not a great look for Bubba Wallace, but that being said, it really, no harm was done to anyone specifically in that instance. So the debates that kind of ran rampant across social media afterwards probably got a little out of hand in some cases, but it was very entertaining. So Bowman should expect us to definitely keep talking about it. But now here's the last thing I want to talk about in this episode, and it involves Hendrick Motorsports as well, but we don't necessarily know which drivers it involves. I don't think it really involves Alex Bowman. It sounds like it involves Jimmie Johnson, but earlier today, Hendrick Motorsports made a huge announcement regarding one of their biggest current sponsors. Ally Financial, who came to Hendrick Motorsports at the end of last season, but started this year as a full-time sponsor for Jimmie Johnson, the 48 car, they revealed today that they have signed a 3-year extension with Hendrick Motorsports. That goes beyond what their current contract was, which went through 2020. Now they are signed on to be full-time sponsors of the 48 car through 2023. That's a 4+ year commitment from now. Full-time, which means 36 races plus, the All-Star race, so basically like 38 races a year, they will be on that 48 car. This is insane. I'll be real, I completely thought the days of, full-time sponsors, like one sponsor sponsoring every single race for a driver, I thought that was pretty much behind us. The only other driver out there today that kind of has that is Denny Hamlin with FedEx, but they've had a relationship for 15 years. It's kind of expected. To have a new company that just showed up, I know Ally was previously GMAC or whatever the company was called, who's been with Hendrick before, but Ally kind of new to the sport technically, to come in and just go all in like this, literally, is shocking to me, especially given that Jimmie Johnson, that 48 car, haven't been that great this year. I'm sure they've sold a lot of t-shirts, definitely gotten a lot of screen time, but, he didn't make the playoffs this year, so the news that a sponsor is investing heavily in NASCAR is really good news, and I'll be honest, I'm positive about NASCAR. I'm always very optimistic about the future. I think that there are a lot of good things in the pipeline, but even this surprised me. I'm very shocked to see a 3-year extension full-time. That's a huge investment from Hendrick Motorsports, or from Ally Financial into Hendrick Motorsports, because Hendrick Motorsports sponsorships are not cheap. Those drivers are expensive to sponsor, so huge credit to Ally. I hope they're getting their money's worth over there. But now this has also raised a lot of questions about Jimmie Johnson and his future, because Jimmie Johnson still only has a contract through 2020, and given that he's now in his 40s, given the decline in performance, a lot of speculation has started to arise in recent months, recent years, as to whether or not Jimmie Johnson will just be done after 2020. Won't bother signing another contract. He'll just kind of have his little farewell tour next year and hang it up at the end of the season and maybe go run a few IndyCar races. That's kind of been the speculation, and even Jimmie himself has fueled some of this speculation. But now, with Ally saying that they're going to sponsor the 48 car specifically for another 3 years past that, is it safe to say maybe that Jimmie Johnson is considering returning for several more years? Let's pump the brakes on that one. Jimmie Johnson had this to say in the media center shortly after this announcement was made.
I don't have a timeline. I personally know that I would like every day that I can before I need to make that decision. There's a lot of things to look at with the Gen 7 car coming. The way our team's performing and what we're building, I might want to go longer in 2023. I just don't know, and I have not put much time and effort into it. There have been many other things to deal with and look at. These things in the past, the contract renewal would usually start in the spring of the year the contract would end. So based on past experience, I would say that probably spring next year is when I would really get pressure to make a decision if I was going to return in 2021.
As you could hear there, I know the audio quality wasn't great, but hopefully you could hear there, Jimmie Johnson has not yet really started considering his options past 2020. From the sounds of it, he doesn't expect him and Hendrick to really sit down and have those talks until the beginning of next season, so we're probably not going to get an answer anytime too soon. And I thought it was also interesting that Jimmie Johnson, he's talking about all the things he's considering when making that decision, whether or not he wants to keep racing and for how much longer. He's considering a lot of things, like, obviously how competitive his team is. 48 team hasn't been that good this year. He's going to consider that. Also, the Gen 7 car, that's another interesting one. I think Jimmie Johnson's the kind of guy who, depending on what this new car is going to look like, that might dictate whether or not he sticks around for another year. That's very interesting, I thought, as well. Overall, what it sounds like to me is Jimmie Johnson's still very undecided. I think he'd like to race for a few more years, but I honestly think the lack of competitiveness the last 2 years now has got to him a little bit. I think as much as he says the fire is still there, I do think it's just got to be kind of dejecting to go to the track each week and run 15th when you're used to winning 83 races. Will Jimmie Johnson continue to race in the Cup Series past 2020? I'm still skeptical just because I think there are a lot of good, solid drivers kind of in the pipeline, not necessarily with Hendrick specifically, but just in the pipeline. I'm thinking of Brett Moffitt's, Ross Chastain's, to go along with guys like Noah Gragson, who's clearly kind of being groomed, it looks like, to drive for Hendrick one day. There's a lot of drivers out there that I think are gunning for a solid seat like that 48 car, and if Hendrick has sponsorship locked up, he might not be as excited to bring Jimmie Johnson back as we might think. Obviously, Rick Hendrick and Jimmie Johnson have a deep, long-lasting relationship. I'm sure Rick Hendrick would love to have Jimmie Johnson in his race cars for 3-5 more years, however much longer. But when it comes down to dollars and cents, who's cheaper, Jimmie Johnson or Ross Chastain? That's an easy question to answer. Anyway, I still think there's a lot of speculation to be had here. I'm still not sold that Jimmie's going to race past 2020. If he wins a race this year and maybe wins a couple races next year, maybe he'll come back. I think if he starts winning again, if he happens to win some more, yeah, he might want to keep racing, I think. But personally, the just constant disappointment that it feels like every week has brought for the 48 car the last 2 years, I just think that's got to be weighing on him as well. I don't think he's going to be racing past 2020, but that's still my opinion. Very interesting, though. Having a big sponsor like that sign on for long term opens up a lot more opportunities for that race team. I was kind of hoping that Ally would sign on with Alex Bowman, because Bowman, with Nationwide leaving, he needs a sponsor for next year. He's only got a couple of races signed on for, I think, next year, so Bowman needs some sponsorship if he wants to stay in the 88 long term. So we'll see. Maybe Ally will switch over to the 88. Who knows? But that's the news for today. That's my opinions on it. Thanks for watching. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. All that great stuff. And, of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. Michael Harrison, at G was the Stars. Cameron James, John Koblenz, Jason R. Long, Wesley Donaldson, Isaac Dennison, Mika Suzuki, iFantasyRace.com, RacingInsiders.com, Matthew Koulopoulos, Pepe Lucius, Jeremy Conklin, Emilio Garcia, Joey DiMaccino, Sky Racing Forms, Bryce Schumacher, Scott McNew, Colton Austin, Bradley Pelletier, and the rest of these incredible Patreon supporters. I couldn't do the show without the support I get from each and every single one of you, every single week, every single month, so thank you a ton. Next episode will be up Sunday night after the Dover race. Hope it's a decent one. I definitely think this air package hurt Dover more than it's hurt probably any other track this year, except the first Pocono. The first Pocono was terrible, but that PJ1 worked wonders in the second Pocono. But so I'm not super optimistic for this race at Dover, but it hopefully will be interesting. It's the first race of round 2, so we might get some new storylines formed as a result. We'll have to wait and see. I'm excited for it. Hope you guys are too, and I'll see you again Sunday night after the race. Have a good one, everyone.